Welcome to the recording for week 3 for C++. I'll go ahead and click on week 3 and you can see that week 3 we're going into the project 2 unit. So if I slide down on the left, here we are in project 2. And you can see project 2 is going to be a calculator program you're going to create. And in project 2, first things, of course, watch the recording, which you're doing now. Then you complete the write-up. Then you go through the labs, labs 1 and 2, then labs 3, 4, and 5. Finally, you have the Project 2 quiz, and of course the quiz preview is posted over here. And then you have assignment 2, which is right here. So similar to week 2 work, what you do is these labs lead you through the basics, in this case the basics of a calculator program. Then when you go into assignment 2, you'll add to and edit the work you did previously. And it's broken up into Tuesday, Thursday, so you can better make that work for whatever schedule you have. So I'll close that for now. And just a couple of reminders. Right here I have a demonstration and explanation videos. So here's the 4-minute video that explains how to do in Project 1, how to do Assignment 1. And here's a demo of how to actually do it. I went through and did the work and I recorded that. So that can help you out. Screenshots. Here I have a screenshot. I'll go ahead and open this. In each project, I'll provide a screenshot to show what your folder should look like. So if you can see this screenshot, what I'm showing you is that I'm in my profile, Ron Harrison C++, resources, and then I have these things in there. So yours should look very similar to this. And mine has the Hello World zip because I've zipped the Hello World work that I completed in week 2. So always look at these images to see what your folders should look like. That can help you out quite a bit. Alright, let's get back to week 2 and we're jumping into, or week 3 and we're jumping into project 2. So project 2, you want to take a look at the notes. I haven't added any extra notes to this yet. The assignment is worth 65 points, and there'll be a couple of other notes, like the lab has 5 parts to it, etc. But I'll add those eventually. But let's jump into project 2. And of course, the first thing we do before we jump into any of this work is look at the Class Connect Writeup so you can get the answers as you go along. So in the project preview of this presentation, page 3, what are the 3 steps the calculator program will go through when you write and run it? So this is what happens in the calculator program. This is what you're going to create, a program that will do this. And that's called a console program because the black box is what opens up and that's what you interact with when you run the program. And for this project, we're going to declare variables, look at floating point variables, print variables on a screen, input data from a user, or store data from a user, look at the integer using an integer variable, looking at if statements, matching up your code, and then finally we'll look at operators. So that's what we'll do for this whole project. In this project preview, in this calculator program, here are the 3 steps that the program will do. First, it's going to ask if you want to add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Then it's going to ask for 2 numbers. Then it prints out the answer. So you can see right here. Choose a task. Which of these tasks are you going to do? Enter your 2 numbers, and finally print out the answer. So these are the 3 things that this program is going to do after you write it. Now, of course, you learned back early on the flowchart and how flowcharts work, and flowcharts help you do your project, help you plan your work. So ask for the first number, ask for the second number, add the numbers, print the results. So that would be the first part of this calculator project. Now here's the bigger part of the calculator project, the whole calculator project and what it does. And if you look at this, Right at the top, as soon as that draws on the screen, right at the top, the user is going to choose number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4, whichever math they want to do. And based on their number, their answer here, then it'll do this for add, this for subtract, this for multiply, and this for divide, and then come up with the answer. So if I chose that I wanted to multiply, then I would go right here and the computer program would run through these steps and print the results. So that's how flowcharts are helpful. Okay, getting into Lab 1. In Lab 1, we're going to set up a console project. And we're going to use the IOStream library. You saw that back in Project 1, standard namespace, and the main function. So Project 1 is going to be creating this console program, or Lab 1, I should say. Let's go back to the write-up. And the write-up says, what is the name of the program you'll open and work on for the calculator project, and where do you find it? Okay. So first thing, I just want to talk, this is called a console project because the work is done, the user interacts in this black console box that opens. Most of the stuff we'll be doing in this class are called console projects. And for the console projects we do, there's these three different components that we'll put in it. And you can see how those things get put into the program. You practice this in Project 1. This is going to walk you through doing it yourself again. You open C++. Of course, you should know how to do that now. All programs, Microsoft C++. And to open the calculator project, just like last week with the Hello World project, it has some of the work done for you already to make life a little bit easier. So of course, you're going to go to your profiles, your username, C++, and then you'll double click on calculator folder, and then the project you open is this one right here. It's called calculator.vc project. See it on the screen? So on that Class Connect Writeup question, that's the name of the project you're going to open. And to get into it, you have to go into your profiles and then into your the profile folder you set up, then into your C++ folder, so then you can find that file. So that's the name of the file right there, calculator.vc project. And again, to get into it, you go into Profiles, Username, C++, Calculator folder. Let's go back to the write-up. And the write-up asks, why do programmers put empty lines between code? In what file do you find the sample lines of code? Okay. So inserting a comment. You've practiced inserting comments before, so you'll just follow these directions. And there's how you add the comment into this calculator CPP that you're creating. And empty lines are important in programming. So you can see these empty lines here. It makes things so much easier to read. So that's the main reason for empty lines, is that it makes code easier to read. So pretty simple answer, isn't it? So empty lines make code easier to read. So you're going to put in the IOStream library command line. You've had practice with that before, so this will take you right through the steps on putting that in. So you can see that you're going to have these two comments. And then you need to go find the file that has some of this coding for you. And that file is called starter_code.txx, and you're going to find it in your resource files. So when you're in the calculator project, you'll find it right under the source files, right here, starter code. And what happens with that is when you open it, you can see up here at the top that it opens up the starter code, right next to your calculator CPP. So, and just like you did in Project 1, you're going to take some of the information out of the starter code. You're going to copy and paste it into your calculator.cpp. You'll copy and paste it where you're told to. So you just work through these steps. Tells you exactly how to do it. Okay, the standard namespace. Again, you're going to the starter_code.text tab right here. You have that open already, and you're copying some of this starter code into the program as you're moving along. You're going to insert the main function. So that you can just type in yourself. So this is what your code should look like now. And there is what your code should look like. So hopefully that's worked out well for you. Okay, now we're going to move on to Lab 2. In Lab 2, I'm going to start adding to this project. So let's go back to the Class Connect Writeup. And of course I answered these questions. So now we're in Lab 2. In programming, what is the definition of a variable and what is the code used to declare a float variable? So now we're going to look at variables. So you're going to open up the calculator project if you don't have it open already. And remember, you're using the calculator.vc project, using that program right there. A variable is a place for a computer to store information. So that's the basic definition of what a variable is. So it can store numbers that the program needs to use. So that's the definition of a variable. And there are three different types of variables that you'll use. And you have to declare variables to give the variable a value. And when you declare a variable, this is called a float variable. This is how you declare a float variable, just like this, float, then variable underscore name. So that's how you declare a float variable. So if I go back to the write-up question, it says, what is the definition of a variable? Well, we talked about that already. What is the coding used to declare a float variable? I just showed you that. So you just work through this. You're in that calculator project, the same one that you started back in Lab 1, and you're going through and it's having you like press the tab key on your keyboard. So at certain times you're going to press the tab key, and that gives you space for your lines. So it makes it much easier to read. So you're going to use that starter_code.txt file and copy resources from that, resource lines, into the program you're working on. So you do exactly what these steps are and everything will work out great. You're going to declare some more variables as you move along. So again, follow these directions. And at the end, just make sure that yours looks very similar to this. So yours needs to look like. Now this starts talking about the values of variables, and sometimes you can give a variable a value right at the beginning that won't change. Then other times you want to make that variable so it will change. or that the user can input variable. Now, a float variable is one that can have a decimal point, like 3.45 or negative 6.78. So that's a float variable. So you would use a float variable if you think that people might put in a decimal number. And next you're going back to your project and you're going to give some values to variables. So in this one, just as this practice, you're going to give values to number 1 and number 2, and then the program is going to add up those numbers. So you can see what this is doing is for number 1, float value number 1, you're calling it 5, float number 2, you're calling it 3, and then of course it's going to print the results. So this is just a real basic addition program. So in this example, what is the value of number 2? So go ahead and guess that, see if you can get that right. And if you look over here, float number 1 equals 5, float number 2 equals number 1. Computer will store the number 5 in the variable number 1, then we'll store the value of number 1 in the variable number 2. The value of number 1 is 5, and 5 will also be the value for number 2. Now what about this one over here? If the float number 1 equals 7, and then number 2 equals number 1, then of course the answer would be 7, right? So you need to be able to read that language and what it's trying to do. Using variables as a value, so you'll go through this within your program doing exactly what you're told to do. So you can see down here your result is going to be number 1 plus number 2, so it's doing that math. Of course, the count command we had earlier, and count command is what prints onto your screen, so that means output. So print hello world on your screen. That's how project 1 did. In this one, it's going to print out result. So right here it says result is going to equal number 1 plus number 2, and then down here the output is going to be whatever the value result has in it. So you're going to go ahead and insert that count command as it says. So follow those steps to do that properly. Putting in the comment lines as you're told to. Then finally you're going to check your work. Make sure yours looks just like this. Yours should look just like that. And then you'll debug it and see if it runs. Okay, so that was lab 2. And I keep mentioning this, and I don't think I can mention it enough, but if you follow the directions, the presentation exactly as it's written, you'll get everything right. If you check your work as you go along after each lab, you'll get it right. Okay, lab 3. What command is used to make the computer move to the next line to print output? Okay, lab 3. So you open up Calculator. By now you should know how to open it. And this is just a reminder, commands end with the semicolon. You've used them a lot so far, so you shouldn't have any trouble remembering that semicolons are really important. And if you go through the debugging and your program won't run, chances are it could be a semicolon or it could be a bracket is incorrect. So you have your calculator program open. You're going to edit the code a little bit. So just follow the space or follow the directions they have right here to edit the code. Do exactly what they're saying. Now, in order to print things and have it move, you use the endl command. That's end line command. That tells the computer to move on to the next line when it's printing text on the screen. Otherwise, if you didn't have these end L, then all the things would be printed one right after the other, right in the same line. So the end L command, it ends the line so your text is easier to read. You're going to insert the out command. So again, follow these directions exactly as it says. And you see when you get to this, you're going to, instead of just the answer printing out, you're going to have it say the answer is, and then it will print it out. So you want to make it so it's user friendly, so when people go through the program that it uses regular English language. The CIN command is to get input. So C out is output, CN is input, right? And you have some input in this program because users are putting in values for variables. We'll get to that eventually. So CN and C out, and the arrows matter. So make sure you know how the arrows go on the out and in. Now you're going to walk through inserting the CIN command. So we're going to ask for the user to put in the first number. So we're going to insert two send commands. Now the thing you can see here is that this program is going to have output. Please enter the first number. That's the output that will show up on the screen. Then immediately on the next line, you won't see this, but it's going to be waiting for a person to put in the first value for the first number. Then it's going to say, please enter the second number. Then it's going to be waiting for a person to enter that value. Then it'll solve the problem for you. So calculated variable values. So you can read up here, float number 1 is 5. The result is float number 1 plus 2, so obviously that's going to equal 7, isn't it? Now if you look over here, float number 1 equals 4, float number 2 equals 5. The result for number 1 plus 2, it should equal 9, right? Good job, we got that right. That's just an example of how those commands can be written. So now you need to calculate the results. So you go through here, and this result right here, the word result is going to equal the number 1 plus the number 2. Then it's going to print the answer eventually. So check your work. Make sure this code is what you have in yours. Make sure it works properly. Okay, that was lab 3. Now we're going to move on to lab 4. We'll look at the Class Connect Writeup questions. Lab 4. Won't you declare an int variable instead of a float variable? What does the if statement do? And explain the equal command. Okay. Okay, lab 4. Now we're going to look at what are called if statements. And if statements are, if something is true, then do this. Of course, you're going to open the calculator program. Integers are numbers without decimal points. So int is a number that can't have a decimal point. So like 5 would be used for the int, but then float you would use 2.1 or like 3.45 or 2.1 would need float. So that's the difference between integer and float. Integer is with non-decimal, float is with numbers that could be decimal. So you're going to declare a variable here, and you're going to declare an integer variable. So again, follow these directions exactly as you're told. Now the if statement tells the computer to do something only if something is true. For instance, if it is cold outside, then put on your coat. Well, in here it says if which calculation equals 1, then it's going to do math. So remember this part right here, this is going to be you're deciding if you're going to do addition, subtraction, division, or multiplication. So if the person types in the number 1, the computer knows that that's going to be addition, so it's going to be addition. But if the person typed in number 2, then it's going to be doing subtraction or something different. Now you're inserting the if statement. So follow these directions exactly. You're going to put a comment line in. So here we have the if statement. Come on, presentation. I hate when this presentation locks up. I have to go to the, luckily I don't have to go to the beginning of it. I can just go to the table of contents. So we were down to lab 4. Insert the if. So hopefully that will pop right up. Here we go. So we're inserting the if statement. So follow all those directions. And you're going to edit the if statement, so you're going to change it a little bit. So you can see what they're going to have you do is take part of one if statement and move it. Just a reminder about brackets. Remember, you always have to have, if you ever have an opening bracket, you must have a closing bracket somewhere. If you don't have the right brackets, then it's not going to work properly. It's very similar to the semicolon. Those are extremely important. Also, indenting code. So they use, just like we use lines between our coding, blank lines between coding to see it easier, indenting makes it easier to see things too. And indent, you use your tab button on your keyboard. So that's usually up near the top left of your keyboard. So now you're going to edit and indent some code. So you're going to delete this comment, then you're going to use your mouse and your tab. So make your code look similar to this with different lines and extra spaces and things like that. You want your code to be easy for somebody to read. Of course, it's not the user, but it's the person who's looking at the code. Comparison. A comparison, the equal, tells the computer to compare two things. It doesn't make them equal. We learned the equal sign earlier makes a variable equal a specific thing. But the equal tells the computer to compare two things on either side of the equal. So we're going to use the equal to compare if a person wants to do addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So you can see right here, if which calculation they chose equals 1, then it's going to be doing this work. If it equals 2, then they'll be doing subtraction. Equals 3, multiplication. So you're going to edit the if command. Again, doing exactly what it says right here. So edit the if command. Check your work. This is exactly what your coding should look like. It should look exactly like this. So you can see that what we've done, we're asking right here, we're asking for a couple of numbers to be put in. And then if a person has chosen number 1 as their calculation, then of course it's going to be doing addition on it. And it's going to print the answer. So up to this point, all we have is the addition command in there. We're going to add the other command shortly. Okay, so now we're going to do more input and output. Follow all these directions. And you can see we're changing our commands. We're going to be adding the subtract, multiply, and divide lines in here. So make sure your code looks just like that. Again, checking your code. So if I scroll down here, you can see that this says, which calculation do you want to do? So right here they're asking which calculation they want to do. And this really won't run very well yet because all we have in right now, we just have the addition. We don't have the subtraction and all that stuff in there yet. Okay, moving on to Lab 5. Let's go back to the write-up. And in the write-up, let's recall if we did all these. When did you declare an int compared to float? We talked about that. What does the if statement do? We talked about that. And the equal, we talked about that. Then the last one down here, what is an operator? And list the 4 main operators. So we're in Lab 5. So Lab 5, we're going to put in the other commands to do the subtraction, multiplication, and division. So open up the calculator program. I'm sure you know how to do that now. And they're going to have you copy the if statement. So you're going to do some copying and pasting on the if statement. So make sure you do exactly what they're saying here. Copying and pasting on the if statement. And that way you have more than just the one if. Because we're going to be doing operators in here. And operators is a special kind of instruction for the computer. That's what an operator is. The 4 main operators are addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Those are the 4 main operators. So an operator is a special kind of instruction for the computer. So if we look over here, what is the value of the variable name result? Well, first this says, let's make integer number 1 equal 2. And then the result should be number 1 times 2, so 2 should be the answer. Uh-oh. Oh, 2 times 2 is 4. My mistake. There we go. All right, moving along with this lab. So we talked about what operators are. So now you're going to make some additions, some adjustments to the which function line. Because the which function line, if you remember, the program asks, what do you want to do? Add, subtract, multiply, or divide. Then you're going to type in the number 1, the number 2, the number 3, or number 4. So we need to add all those lines in that will do that for us. Because if we type the number 1, then it's going to ask for 2 numbers, then it will add them. If we type the number 2, it'll ask for 2 numbers, then we'll subtract them. Type number 3, it'll ask for 2 numbers and multiply, etc. So you can see what these lines are. Here you're inputting your numbers. And this said if we had put the number 1 as our selection, then it's going to add the numbers together. If we had put the number 2 as our selection, then it's going to subtract the numbers. And you're going to then do it so it will be divide and multiply also. So here you're doing the multiplication one. And really all you're doing is just copying similar lines, but you're just changing the operators so that the computer will do the math differently depending on what selection the person makes. So now you can look down here and you can see that it has the addition one, the subtraction one, and the multiplication one. It has all those things in there. And finally, as you guessed, you're going to edit the last of the if statements, and this is the one for divide. So now you'll have all 4 of those operators in there. So then whatever numbers the person puts in, whatever selection they make, it'll do add, subtract, multiply, or divide. And you can see down here, here's the last one, here's the set of data for the divide. You're going to put a pause in there, so and you learned from project 1 that pause makes the computer it stop so you can read it on the screen. I don't know if you saw that pop up, but it said you had a problem with your computer or something like that. Luckily we were down towards the end, but I'll go to the table of contents anyway, and let's see what we had at the end right here. Okay, the pause command, just about finished. Okay, so we added the pause command. Once we add the pause command, then we want to check our work. So you want to check to make sure that yours is all of this. So you save it, and then you go to the debug menu and hit debug menu, then start debugging. Make sure it works properly. And then to run it, you can just go to debug and then do start without debugging. Now if you get an error when you debug, it says it can't debug or something, you need to make sure you save it. Then last, you go into your folders, you navigate to your folders and go into the calculator folder. You'll see a folder called debug, and in the calculator folder, in the debug folder, calculator.exe, and that will run it by itself. So that's what you do for project 2. And then of course assignment 2 is going to be, and I will make a recording for this, but assignment 2, you're going to open up the calculator program, but then you're going to change it to do something different. So you're going to be using that calculator program, but you're going to be doing different things to it. It's going to be a favorite number activity of some sort, but I'll have a different recording for that. Okay, that's all I have for you on this. I look forward to your work coming in, but again, if you follow all the directions that they have for project 2, you will do well, and make sure you check your code at the end of each lab.